There comes a strange silence in a marriage after many years. Not the silence of distance, not the silence of anger. A different kind. The silence of two people who no longer need to explain themselves to each other. It is quiet, but it is not empty. If you have ever sat across from someone you have loved for decades and said nothing at all and felt completely at peace, you already know the silence I am talking about. Tonight, I want to tell you about two people like that. Their names were Henrik and Liv. They lived in a small wooden house outside a town in southern Norway. The kind of house where the floorboards remember footsteps and the windows fog up slightly in the evenings. Henrik was 73. Liv was 71. They had been married for 41 years. Their children were grown, scattered between Oslo and Bergen, calling on Sundays, visiting twice a year, sometimes 3 times if a grandchild had a birthday. Most evenings, Henrik and Liv sat in the same room. He in his chair by the window, she on the small sofa with the blanket her mother had knitted. Decades ago, the color long faded into something between gray and lavender. The television was rarely on. Sometimes there was music, low, almost a whisper through the old radio. But mostly, there was just the sound of the house, the clock, the wind outside, the occasional creak of the floor as one of them shifted in their seat. They did not talk much anymore. Not because they had run out of things to say, but because somewhere along the way, they had said enough. When Henrik was young, he used to be a man of many words. He proposed to Liv with a long letter, 4 pages, written by hand, describing every reason he loved her. Her laughter, her stubbornness, the way she hummed while cooking, the way she never let him win at cards. Liv still has that letter. It sits in a drawer she rarely opens, not because she has forgotten it, but because she does not need to read it to remember it. In the early years of their marriage, they used to talk for hours about dreams, about fears, about the kind of life they wanted to build. They talked about children before they had them, and about old age before they understood what old age would actually feel like. Back then, talking felt like the only way to be close. But somewhere in the 3rd decade together, something shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was the kind of change you only notice by looking backward. The way you notice your hair has gone gray only when you see an old photograph. There is a particular kind of intimacy that develops only with time. Psychologists sometimes call it companionate love, the kind that replaces passion not with indifference, but with a deep, quiet trust. It is not less love. It is love that no longer needs to prove itself. When Henrik makes tea in the evening, he does not ask Liv if she wants a cup. He simply makes 2. When Liv feels cold, she does not ask Henrik to close the window. He has already noticed, and he is already walking toward it. This is what 40 years does. It does not erase communication. It transforms it into something that does not always need words. Of course, their life was not without difficulty. There was a year decades ago when Henrik lost his job at the shipping company. He stopped talking almost entirely for nearly 3 months. Liv did not press him. She simply continued setting 2 plates at dinner, continued leaving his coffee exactly the way he liked it, continued sitting beside him in silence, until one evening he finally spoke. "I'm scared," he said. That was all. But it was enough. There was another year, much later, when their youngest son moved abroad, and Liv cried quietly in the kitchen for weeks, trying not to let Henrik see. He saw anyway. He never asked her to explain it. He simply began walking with her in the evenings, along the gravel road near their house, saying nothing, letting her walk it out of her body in her own time. This is something people rarely talk about. How much of love is simply being present while someone else feels what they need to feel, without trying to fix it, without needing them to explain it perfectly. Aging brings a particular kind of loneliness that few people prepare you for. It is not always about being alone. Sometimes it is about realizing that the people who knew you when you were young, your parents, old friends, certain versions of yourself, are gone or fading or simply living lives too far away to reach easily. Henrik often thinks about his old friend Lars, who he grew up with, fished with, worked alongside for 30 years. Lars passed 5 years ago. Henrik still sometimes catches himself wanting to tell him something, a joke, an old memory triggered by a smell or a sound, only to remember a second too late that there is no one to tell anymore. This is a particular grief that comes with growing older. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet ache that visits sometimes in the afternoon light. Liv has her own version of this. Her sister Astrid lives only 2 hours away, but they speak perhaps once a month now, not because they love each other less, but because life simply filled itself with other things. Children, grandchildren, doctor's appointments, small responsibilities that quietly took up all the spaces where long conversations used to live. Sometimes Liv wonders if this is simply what happens to everyone. Eventually, not abandonment, just erosion. Slow, soft, and almost invisible until you notice how much space has been worn away. But here is something Liv has come to understand, something she could not have understood at 30 or even 50. Loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is the ache of disconnection. Solitude is the peace of being enough on your own. even while loving someone deeply beside you. Liv often experiences solitude, even when Henrik is in the room. She might be reading a book. He might be repairing something at the kitchen table, and neither of them speaks for an hour. It is not emptiness. It is companionship that does not require performance. There is a particular evening Liv remembers clearly, though it was, on the surface, an utterly ordinary one. It was raining. Henrik sat in his chair, looking out the window, watching the droplets slide down the glass, distorting the porch light into long golden streaks. Liv sat across from him, her tea slowly cooling in her hands. Neither of them said anything for nearly 40 minutes. And yet, Liv recalls feeling something she rarely had words for. A fullness. A sense that this, exactly this, was what a life well lived might actually look like. Not excitement, not passion, just presence. Two people growing old in the same room, comfortable enough in each other's company to let silence simply exist between them. There is a strange myth in our culture that love should always be loud, that it should be expressed constantly, declared often, proven repeatedly. But anyone who has lived a long life beside another person knows a different truth. Love in its most mature form often grows quiet. It does not need daily declaration because it has become part of the architecture of a life. The same way you do not announce that you are breathing, you do not always need to announce love that has become as natural and necessary as breath. This does not mean Henrik and Liv never struggle. There are still nights when one of them feels unseen. There are still mornings of mild irritation, small disagreements about nothing important. Whether the heating should be on, whether the car needs washing, whether they should visit their son in October or November. They are not a fairy tale. They are simply two people who have learned, slowly, painfully, and patiently, how to remain close without needing to fill every moment with words. One afternoon last winter, their granddaughter, 19 years old, visited from the city. She sat with them for a while, scrolling through her phone, glancing occasionally at her grandparents, sitting silently across from each other. "Don't you guys ever get bored?" she asked, half joking. Liv smiled. "No," she said. "We've just run out of things we need to say to feel close." Her granddaughter didn't fully understand. She was young. Love for her still meant constant conversation, constant validation, constant reassurance. But Liv did not try to explain further. Some things are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be lived into slowly over many years. There is something quietly beautiful about growing old beside someone who has watched every version of you. Henrik has seen Liv as a young bride, nervous and excited, as a new mother, exhausted but glowing, as a woman grieving her own mother, as someone proud, someone frightened, someone furious, someone joyful. And still, after all these versions, he chooses to sit beside her in the quiet evening light. Not because the passion of their youth remains exactly the same, but because something steadier has replaced it. Something that does not need performance to be real. Psychologists who study long marriages often describe a similar pattern. In early relationships, couples rely heavily on verbal communication to build trust and understanding. But in long-term relationships, the ones that survive decades, communication often becomes more nonverbal. A glance, a gesture, the way one partner instinctively reaches for 2 cups instead of 1. This is not a loss of connection. It is connection so deeply internalized that words become less necessary. As the years pass, Henrik and Liv have learned something that took most of their lives to understand. You do not need to fill every silence to prove love exists. Sometimes silence is the proof. The comfort of being able to sit beside someone without needing to perform happiness, perform conversation, perform anything at all. That perhaps is one of the quiet rewards of growing old beside another person. Tonight, as I imagine Henrik and Liv sitting in their small wooden house, the lamp casting soft amber light across the room, the rain falling steadily outside, I think about something simple. Maybe love, in its truest and most mature form, is not about how much you say to each other. Maybe it is about how safe silence feels when you are with the right person. Maybe the deepest connection is not built through words at all, but through years of simply choosing again and again to remain present beside someone. If you are someone who has grown quieter with age, if conversations with the people you love have become shorter, simpler, sometimes wordless, this does not necessarily mean something has been lost. Sometimes it means something has finally settled. Sometimes silence is not absence. It is understanding that no longer needs translation. Henrik and Liv will likely never describe their relationship as extraordinary. To them, it is simply life. Ordinary mornings, quiet evenings, 2 cups of tea instead of 1, a blanket shared without asking, a glance exchanged across the room that says more than any letter ever could. And perhaps that is the quiet truth so many of us spend our whole lives searching for. Not grand declarations of love, but the simple peace of being understood without having to explain yourself at all. So tonight, wherever you are, however your own silences feel, whether you sit beside someone you love or sit alone with your memories of someone you once did, I hope you find a little of that peace. The peace of a life slowly understood. The peace of silence that no longer needs to be filled. Good night. If this quiet moment resonated with you, you are always welcome here. This channel was created for slow reflections, honest emotions, and the thoughts many people carry silently through life. If you'd like more stories like this, you can gently subscribe and return whenever you need a peaceful place to think, feel, or simply listen. Thank you for spending this moment here tonight. Take care of yourself and rest well.